Hey, what is up, Irish Breakdown Nation? I am Vince Dodaro. I am the football analyst here at irishbreakdown.com. And usually with me, as always, is Brian Driscoll, the publisher at irishbreakdown.com. And he's with us in spirit. We are going to do the second half of our show from yesterday. We are going to talk about the Notre Dame defense versus the Florida State offense. And this is kind of what we are going to do every Wednesday here during the game week preparation. So Tuesday is the Notre Dame offense versus the opponent defense. Wednesday is the Notre Dame defense versus the opponent offense. And you are going to hear a bit of a different vibe from Brian and I in this one. We recorded this the other day because Brian is on his way back from being out of town, but we didn't want to miss an opportunity to talk to all of you. So this is a good one. Our Stacking Up series continues. So this is the Notre Dame defense versus the Florida State offense. We start with the rush game. We talk about the pass game, and then we talk about overall scoring, overall offense and defense. And it's a good one. So again, the Stacking Up feature, two guys, two coaches, talking ball, breaking it down for you, all of the above. So here we go. Okay, Brian, let's jump right in. Stacking Up, we're going to be talking the Notre Dame defense versus the Florida State offense. We're going to break it all down for you. I tell you, this, as we were talking yesterday about the opposite, right? We're talking about the Notre Dame offense versus the Florida State defense. I was really excited to talk about this group today.
Yes. This is going to be the best matchup of the game.
Yeah, and I'm very excited to see what this defensive line brings to the table. Look, we're going to see Marcus Freeman's imprint on this defense for the first time ever. Mm-hmm. And we have all, everybody in the chat, you and me, the media, the national Marcus Freeman, right? And with rightfully so, with what he's done on the recruiting trail, et cetera. This is where the rubber meets the road. We actually get to see a Marcus Freeman-led Notre Dame defense live and in person. I'm fired up for it. I'm excited about it. And there's some intriguing matchups here when we're talking about this side of the football versus Florida State's offense.
You know, Vince, you've heard me talk a lot about I feel like Florida State's trending in the right direction, and I think this team's going to be better this year. And I think they're going to be, especially if they can pull off some early season big wins. I think that they're a team that could, not only be bowl contending, but maybe win 7 or 8 games and then head into next year more optimistic about, hey, they're really turning a corner. And then you listen to yesterday, and we're just trashing the defense, right? So you're like, where's the optimism coming from? This is the side of the ball where my optimism is coming from. And it's not just the present, but the future at Florida State. But today we're going to focus on the present because that's the thing that matters about this matchup. And here's a couple realities about Florida State. They are not the Florida State of old. There's no Peter Warrick on the other side of the field, right? There's no Warrick Dunn. There's no Tony Baselli at left tackle, right?
I had no idea he went to Florida State. Okay.
Yeah. No. Tony Baselli went to USC. Who am I thinking of?
I don't know. I was like, wow. Okay.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I don't know because then he played at
Jacksonville.
Walter Jones. That's who I'm thinking of.
Okay.
That's who I'm thinking of. There's none of those guys that are going to be showing up on this football team. Charlie Ward's not playing quarterback for them.
Right.
And so when I look at this football team, I say, okay, that is true. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that they're a bunch of bums either. There's some good football players on this side of the ball, and they're skill players. Although there is no Warrick Dunn, this is going to be one of the best backfields that Notre Dame is going to face at running back. There's no Peter Warrick at wide receiver. But this is a good group of wide receivers. There's some decent depth there. They got a grad transfer from Kansas we're going to talk about. They got a good tight end. There's weapons there for the quarterbacks to work with. No elite players. It's just a good group. Quarterback's a bit of a question mark. There's two different types of players. And then the offensive line was terrible last year. But there was at one point last year, however, that they started 4 freshmen in one game. Those guys are all back.
Right.
And they all have a lot of butt whoopings under their belt that, as you and I have found out in the past, those butt whoopings when you're a freshman become fuel for you when you're a sophomore, a junior, and a senior. You learn from those. And so when I look at this football team, do I think that they have enough to beat Notre Dame? Not if they both play good games. Notre Dame's still the better team, but is there enough firepower on this offense that if the Notre Dame defense doesn't, if the Notre Dame offense makes mistakes, if the defense makes mistakes, that they could create some problems for Notre Dame?
Well, and this is one of those matchups where, you and I have talked in the past about when we were projecting, right? When we were doing our projections on Saturday, that Notre Dame's facing some teams that can score the football. And they haven't shown in the past that they can score the football, but I think this year's group has the ability to potentially put up some points and maybe protect that defense a little bit, right? And right, when you said that they're ascending, it's this side of the ball, and this side of the ball is going to have to ascend because of the defense a little bit, right? In order for them
to a degree, to a degree. I think the defense is going to be better. We talked about that yesterday, but it's like better from being awful, right. The offense wasn't awful last year. There were parts of the offense that weren't good, pass game wise, especially protecting the quarterback, not good.
Yeah.
I don't see any future first round draft picks coming back on the offensive line, but it's also not a terrible group. The talent level isn't what it was 2-3 years ago when it was like you can bring back all the returning starters you want. They were terrible.
Yeah, right.
That's not the case with this group. There's some good players there. They're just young. They're going to start 3 redshirt freshmen, and you can call them redshirt freshmen. They're returning starters. Florida State is essentially writing the COVID year into the eligibility of all their players. Which is fine. I'm okay with that. So there's 3 guys that they list as redshirt freshmen on the depth chart that can be misleading because normally redshirt freshmen aren't returning starters. Well, all three of those guys started at least 4 games last year.
Yeah.
So those are the things you look at and say, there's some potential. And this is the reason why I've said I would much rather play this group in the opener than in October and November.
When they get their sea legs, and they kind of get things figured out. That's a really good point.
Right.
All right, so let's jump in. When we talk our stacking up show, we talk about the rush offense, defense. We talk about pass offense, defense, and we talk about total, right? Mm-hmm. So we're going to start with the rush, and we're going to start with based on the rankings of last year, that both teams were the best at when we're talking about this side of the football. So Notre Dame's rush defense, 16th in the country. Florida State's rush offense, 31st in the country, which I will admit, when I looked that up this afternoon, I was a little bit surprised by that fact that they averaged 1/10 of a yard under 200 yards a game on the ground.
Here's the other thing to think about, Vince. 31st in the nation with 199.9 yards per game. Look at where they rank, however, in tackles for loss allowed. Imagine what their run game would look like if they didn't rank 104th in tackles for loss allowed. And now, part of that is, and we'll show this here real quick. Let's just kind of look ahead real fast. Sacks allowed, they ranked 112th. Right. So that was part of it too. But even if you look at the tackles for loss, they gave up 29 sacks. And again, they only played 9 games last year. That means they gave up 37 tackles for loss. That's a lot. Okay. That's a lot to give up. And that comes from being a young, inexperienced offensive line. They're a massive offensive line. So when they played right, they could push people. That's a thing about them. When you look at their depth chart, Vince, left to right, their offensive line is 312, 321, 280, 323, and 294. They got some big dudes on there. And so when you look at it, you say, okay, they had success running the ball. Where'd that come from? Where'd that success come from? And when you break Florida State down last year, you look at a couple things, as we talked about before. One of the better running back groups they're going to have. Desean Corbin, transfer from Texas A&M, played for them last year. He ran for 401 yards. Lawrence Tafeli ran for 356 yards and averaged 9.6 yards per carry. And their quarterback, Jordan Travis, ran for 559 yards a game. He led them in rushing last year, 5.8 yards per carry. Think about that when you also consider how many times he was sacked.
Yeah.
Sacks in college count towards your run game.
Which is ridiculous, but that's a whole other show. That's a whole other conversation.
Yeah. So when you think about that, they had a quarterback that was sacked a lot who still averaged 5.8 yards per carry. that's where you want to know why they're good in the run game. It's they got talent and they got a quarterback that can run.
Yeah.
You look at the two backs. You look at Desean Corbin is a physical runner. I wouldn't call him like a bulldozer or anything like that, but he runs hard. He's a lot like Sebo Flemister. He doesn't look like he'd be a guy that's a physical runner. Doesn't look like Audric Estime, for example, but he runs hard. He makes good reads. He's a slasher, a physical guy, one cut, get downhill, hit people, and, doesn't have great speed, but he's quick. He's a good athlete. He's just not like – he's more Dexter Williams than he is Chris Tyree. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And so he's a good back. Then you bring Lawrence Toafili in there. He's, 6'1", 6'2". He can catch the ball. He's a home run hitter. He averaged last year over 9 yards a carry. It was very similar to kind of what the numbers Dexter Williams put up. If you remember back in 2017, Vince, when Dexter Williams ran for, 300 some yards, but he averaged over 9 yards a carry because he didn't carry much. But when he did, it was a big play. Yeah. And that's kind of what it was. It was, they're not built like Thunder and Lightning, but like production wise, they're Thunder and Lightning.
Right. Same effect. Yeah.
Desean Corbin's at 5 yards a carry, hammer. You look at Lawrence Toafili, who, there was a game where he had 0 carries, a game where he had 3 carries for 1 yard against Notre Dame, 3 carries for 1 yard, although he did catch a pass for 31 yards. No carries against Carolina, didn't play against NC State, 1 carry for -1 yard against Pitt. But then there's, 8 carries for 64 yards at Miami. Remember, Miami had 2 DNs get drafted in the first round last year. He had 12 carries for 99 yards against Jacksonville State. And then he ended the season against Duke with 7 carries for 117 yards.
Yeah, that'll help.
And then you look at how they played in that game against Duke. Now, again, Duke was terrible, but Desean Corbin ran for 72 yards. Lawrence Toafili ran for 72 yards. And then you start looking at it and you say, boy, they had some guys that could do some damage, and then Jordan Travis ran for 90 yards in that matchup. So there's some weapons in the run game to work with there. The question for them is going to be twofold. Number one, can the offensive line eliminate the mistakes that resulted in those just drive-killing tackles for loss? 1st and 10, you're -4.
Right.
That's a big part of it. And then can they be and that's where you get down to the efficiency part. Can the offensive line play to that level? The second part we'll get into in a minute, and that is, can the pass game provide them with some protection? Because that's the other part that's impressive about their run performance last year. Is nobody was afraid of Florida State throwing the ball on them last year, especially when Jordan Travis was a quarterback.
Well, they were one-dimensional. I mean,
right.
and I mean that in the strictest sense of the word. Nobody was worried about. I mean, we talk about teams packing the box against Notre Dame because they weren't worried about the pass game.
Right.
Notre Dame's pass game was a Hall of Fame pass game in comparison to what Florida State did last year. Right. I mean,
in the game where they upset North Carolina, Vince, their quarterbacks went 8 of 19 for 191 yards and 1 touchdown. They had like couple long plays. They went 8 of 19 and went on the road or at home, beat a team at the time was top 5. They weren't a real top 5 team. They were partly top 5 because some teams weren't even playing yet.
Yeah, right.
But still, they went on the road, beat a team that everybody thinks is going to be a top 10 team this year, beat them, and their quarterback completed 8 passes.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Now, Jordan Travis was a threat with his legs, and you've already established that, and that's really how he hurt Notre Dame. When Notre Dame was hurt by their offense, right? It was by him using his legs,
right?
And so he's a threat if he's going to be the quarterback. And see that's the other thing, we don't even know who the quarterback is going to be. But we're talking about the rush offense for Florida State. If Jordan Travis is the quarterback, that makes this an even deeper run game than if it's Mackenzie Milton, quarterback.
So let's look at last year, Vince. When you look at Notre Dame, I'm going to take the Florida State game out. Here's what Notre Dame did on the ground last year with their rush defense. This is yards allowed: 76, 106, 96, 44, 88, 34 to Clemson, 85, and 87. That took them into the Syracuse game. They gave up 229 against Syracuse. We talked about that. They had like an 80-yard run late. They wasn't that good of a game. They had a lot of junk.
I remember that that play. Yeah.
So in between that, the opener against Duke and the game against North Carolina, Notre Dame gave up over 106 yards one time. That was to Florida State. They gave up 153 yards to Florida State in that game. Well, then you look at it and say, okay, well Notre Dame had 4 sacks for minus 22 yards. So you add 22 yards onto that 175 gained like rushing yards. You take the sacks away. So they had some success. And as you said, a lot of that was Jordan Travis running around. That's not going to change if he's the quarterback this year.
Right. Absolutely.
And this is where we're going to learn something about the Marcus Freeman defense. What was the kryptonite to Clark Lee in recent years?
Mobile quarterbacks.
It was mobile quarterbacks.
Absolutely.
I mean, even in really to a degree, and during Mike Elko's tenure, if you go back all the way to 2017, Vince,
it's been an issue for a while.
Yeah,
it's become a go-to phrase for people in the media because it's a real thing.
Right.
But like the mobile quarterback is a problem for Notre Dame, et cetera.
It's a problem for a lot of people, but it
Right.
has been. Even going back to 2017, you had the quarterback at Wake Forest. You had Malik Rozier had some scrambles against Notre Dame that year. 2018, they didn't play a whole lot of mobile quarterbacks that year.
Yeah.
And that was a great defense, right? First mobile quarterback they really played that year, if you want to be honest about it, other than Malcolm Perry at Navy, who doesn't really count. But they knocked Eric Dungy was a mobile quarterback. They knocked him out in the first quarter against Syracuse, if you remember that.
That's right.
There weren't a whole lot of other mobile quarterbacks on the schedule that year. And then they played Trevor Lawrence, and his mobility was a problem for Notre Dame.
Right.
And you fast forward to 2019, they had issues with Jawan Pass at Louisville, if you remember that year.
I do.
The first half against Virginia, Bryce Perkins gave them a lot of problems. It wasn't until the second half that they just unleashed hell on that Virginia offensive line.
That was ugly.
But Virginia was moving the ball on Notre Dame early. Shea Patterson had some scrambles for chain moving plays and big plays in that wet game. Virginia Tech didn't really have much of a mobile quarterback. The rest of the schedule didn't have much of a mobile quarterback. And guess what? Notre Dame shut all those teams down.
Right.
So that's the kind of thing that you look at, Vince, and say that. And then, of course, Jordan Travis last year. I mean, this was a 35-26 game in the second half, Vince. Florida State had a lead at one point in time in that game. Now, part of that was, again, Notre Dame turning the ball over a bunch.
Sure.
But when you look at the run game, Vince, that's the part that's going to make this interesting. And then you look at against a Notre Dame defensive line that's undersized relative to Florida State, a defensive line or a front seven that's, missing its anticipated will linebacker. I have projected, and I think you agree with me, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that the run defense won't miss a beat with J.D. Bertrand compared to Maris Liufau. We're going to find out in game one if that's true.
Yes, we will. Because that's going to be their crutch. Yeah. It's going to be their run game because they know they can do that.
Right.
I mean, look, when you're calling plays, Brian, when you were an offensive when you were the run game coordinator, pass game coordinator, whatever, and you're calling plays, you lean on what you're good at, right? You lean on what you know you can do.
You're any good at what you do, yes, correct.
Well, fair enough.
That wasn't a pushback, Vince. That was an add-on.
No. Yes,
to what you're saying. Yes. If you're good at what you do, yes, that's exactly what you do.
Right. You lean on what you're good at. And this is the first game of the season. So the last time these guys were on the field, they were good at running the football. So guess what? They're going to run the football. And so, and again, a lot of this comes down to who the quarterback is. And obviously we're going to talk about that when we get into the pass game stuff. But when we're talking about the run game, if it's Jordan Travis, he's going to be involved in the run game.
Right.
And so Notre Dame
and Mackenzie Milton, and then the flip side is if it's Mackenzie Milton and he's playing to his potential, he's going to give them more of a pass game threat, which then protects the run game. So either way, the quarterback is going to impact the run game.
Yes, no question. No question. It's just a kind of a different way to prepare, though, because Mackenzie Milton is a pocket passer. He's not, especially coming off of his injury.
He is. We think he is now. Yes, correct.
That's what I was referring to.
He definitely wasn't that at UCF, but yes, with that, I mean, kid lost over 2 years of football. Right. He's not going to look like the guy he was at UCF.
And if I'm his coach, I don't want him running around like
especially in the opener. Yeah, especially in the opener. And then, Vince, what are some of the questions that we have? And this isn't questions about the defense in regards to we're worried about them being bad, but they're just questions that we have.
Yeah.
You know, how's MTA going to handle being a big end? Right? We've seen him in practice. Now we get to see him in a game. You know, are Adam Yola and Riley Mills going to be as good as we thought they're going to be? All right. How's Foskey going to be now as a starter? You know, you've got the Will linebacker situation with Liufau being out and J.D. Bertrand, who's never really played any high leverage snaps during his career. You know, he's been mostly a special teams guy. Drew White, does he bounce back and play better than he did last year? Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah made some huge plays against Florida State last year. If you remember that one play where they ran a pitch play and he just came out and just crushed that running back. How's Jack Kaiser and those Rovers going to do playing that role? So there's a lot we're going to learn about this Notre Dame offense or this Notre Dame defense in the opener, in my opinion. And it's going to be on all levels of the defense. And that's what makes this matchup very, very intriguing.
Oh, it absolutely is. And it's those question marks that we think we may have answers to, at least in my head. But at the same time, we need to see it. And
that's what I mean when I say questions. It's just like, hey, we think that this is going to be good.
Right.
But now it's time to, it's put up or shut up time now.
Because, look, Notre Dame's been going against Notre Dame, all through camp and what we've seen. And we think that the front seven is going to be able to get after it in the run game. Well, this is a great first test to see if that's the case. So we're going to see if when the rubber meets the road, if they can actually put up or shut up. So
another interesting part about this too, Vince, is I forgot to mention, and I should have mentioned it, but also one of their starting offensive linemen at left guard is going to be Desean Gibbons, the Notre Dame transfer.
Right, of course.
Well, obviously he came in and played left guard last year for Notre Dame in this game when Liam Eichenberg went out. They bumped Aaron Banks out to left tackle. Desean Gibbons came in. He was in the game for a couple of those long runs. So we'll see how he performs, in this game. So it's going to be an intriguing matchup, no question about it.
And they've got him at right guard. Is that accurate? It's
I thought it was left guard.
Okay,
So the depth chart that they released. So we're recording this show on Monday night. They released their depth chart today.
Okay,
he was at left guard.
Okay,
so that was, and here's the other thing too about this: a couple guys that were starters for them last year for a chunk of the season got beat out in fall camp on the offensive line too. So that's another sign if you're Florida State. Dante Lucas was a starter at times last year. Bavion Johnson started some games for them last year. Those are two veteran guys. Johnson's a redshirt senior. Lucas is a redshirt sophomore, meaning he's at least a third-year player. Those guys are on the bench.
Yeah,
because of some of these younger guys. So you have to think that the coaching staff believes they're putting a more talented group of blockers on the field. That's going to be the intriguing matchup. And if the Notre Dame defensive line is as good as we think it's going to be, it's going to have to show up in this part of the game.
Yes, no question. So advantage time. Notre Dame rush defense versus Florida State's rush offense. Who you got?
It was very close to going even on this one, Vince, but I'm going to give a slight edge to Notre Dame because I do think this is a talented group, and if Jordan Travis is a quarterback, that makes me want to go even. But that's still a war situation. I think Notre Dame has the edge along the lines. Florida State has some issues, has some skill that could give Notre Dame some problems. I'm going to lean towards Notre Dame advantage, but I think it's going to be a lot closer than some people think because this is going to be one of the better running teams Notre Dame faces all year. That number right there, that 31st ranking, Vince, that wasn't a fluke.
Yeah,
it's not like they went and had a game last year where they Jacksonville State. You saw they ran for 263 against Jacksonville State. They ran for 151 against Miami, 153 against Notre Dame, 241 against Carolina, 265 against Louisville, 324 against Duke. I'm sorry. So that's what they did. So I mean that's good work.
Yeah,
that's good work by Florida State, no question about it.
So I am also going to go with Notre Dame. I've just seen too much in person at practice, the athleticism, the quickness off the ball, all of that from this front for Notre Dame. Jason Adamiola, Riley Mills, MTA. Just that whole group. Seeing what they've been doing at practice with my own two eyes. I can't go with Florida State. I have a lot of faith in what this front is going to do, and then you add in Marcus Freeman to kind of activate these linebackers and what they're going to be able to do, especially J.D. Bertrand. To be honest with you, I'm very interested to see what they do with him in the run game because I think he can be a very active player in the run game, and I want to see what Marcus Freeman does when he activates that group. So I'm taking Notre Dame. I think I'm a little bit more confident than you are. But again, if Mackenzie Milton is the quarterback, I'm super confident in the run defense. Super confident. If it's Jordan Travis, it comes back a little bit, right? Because of that mobile quarterback situation and all everything we just talked about. It does come back for me, but it's still going to be an advantage to Notre Dame.
And one last thing that I think plays in Notre Dame's favor too is the Florida State people have been making a lot of the fact that Mike Norvell has faced Marcus Freeman a lot. Mike Norvell had a lot of success against the Cincinnati defense when he was at Memphis. That was early in the Cincinnati tenure. They were replacing a fired coaching staff.
Right.
And it took them a while. He didn't face the 2019 and 2020 versions of Florida State. You know what I mean? Or Cincinnati.
Cincinnati. Right.
Correct.
And Notre Dame's talent level wasn't there either, and that makes a difference.
Right. Well, he did face the 2019 version. They didn't face the 2018 Memphis team that beat Cincinnati twice in back-to-back games, I believe. Or was that 2019? I always get this. Yeah. So 2019, they beat Memphis beat Cincinnati back-to-back games. And it was one in the end of the regular season, then one in the
championship
AAC title game.
Yeah.
Right. And they had success running the ball on Cincinnati in both of those games.
Okay.
It wasn't until 2020 that the Cincinnati defense really took off. So those are the things you have to look at and say, okay, what are they going to be like? Well, in 2020, Cincinnati held Memphis to 5 yards rushing. Well, Mike Norvell wasn't there anymore.
Right.
So those are the things you look at and say, oh, okay, advantage who? Well, to me, it's advantage Memphis. Because if you look at those matchups, Memphis they were deeper into Mike Norvell's tenure. He took over for a coach who had success. Justin Fuente did a great job, got the Virginia Tech job. So they were further along. Well, now it's Marcus Freeman that has the advantage in talent.
Right. Absolutely.
It's and those type of things. So that's going to be really interesting. I think that is something that plays a little bit into Marcus Freeman's favor. Even though Mike Norvell got the edge on him in their matchups in the AAC, I think that's going to benefit Marcus Freeman more than it's going to benefit Mike Norvell.
So let's move on to our second category, Brian. Pass defense for Notre Dame versus the pass offense for Florida State. And I think this is the biggest question mark because we don't know who the quarterback is going to be for Florida State. And defensively for Notre Dame, you pretty much got a brand new secondary out there within reason. And so you got a lot of unknowns coming in in this aspect of the offense versus the defense. I think the bigger unknown is that, well, for us, because we're not at Florida State practice, right? Because they haven't named a starter. That's the bigger question mark for me is who the quarterback's going to be. If it's Travis, I'm really in no way worried about the pass game. I'm just not. I'm sorry.
Well, I guess where I would say I would disagree with you is I'm not worried about him picking the Notre Dame defense apart. Where I'm concerned about this matchup, Vince, is him scrambling around. The safeties are like, uh-oh, Travis is running again, and he pulls up and throws it over your head. That's where Jordan Travis had success last year. Those are the areas where I feel like that's where you run that risk of, okay, you want to have your safeties coming down and helping in the pass game or in the run game or when he scrambles. I mean, again, as I pointed out in the North Carolina game, he only went 8 of 19 against North Carolina.
Yeah.
But it went for 191 yards. Right. Those were big plays.
Yeah, right.
And, averaged, even though he was at 42% completions, they averaged 10.1 yards per attempt in that game.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right. Even though, and you don't see that when you're completing under 50, barely over 40% of your passes, then that's because of what they did in the big plays. I mean, they averaged 23.9 yards per catch in those games. So it was just a bunch of bombs over there. It's almost kind of like they were a modern version of Navy. If Navy kind of came into the modern era, and what would a Navy offense look like if they weren't a pure triple option team anymore? It's what Florida State looked like last year with Jordan Travis, the quarterback, right? And that's the danger.
When everybody gets sucked in because they're worried about the run, and then they throw it over the top because you've got your eyes in the backfield. That's essentially what you're saying. That's
what I'm saying. And they have enough athletes in the skill positions at receiver. When you look at Keyshawn Helton, you look at Ontario Wilson, when you look at Cam McDonald, they're tight end. They like to use their backs in the pass game. I mean, Lawrence Tafili, I think, what did I say? 3 yards for three carries for -1 yards against Notre Dame last year. We had a 31-yard catch where he lines up in the slot, runs a corner out, beats Houston Griffith, then catches the ball and gets a 31-yard gain.
Right.
So that's, am I worried about Jordan Travis dropping back and picking Notre Dame apart? No, not at all. Do I think that their offensive line can protect the quarterback? I hope not. If they can't, then that's going to be a problem. That's going to be a bad sign for Notre Dame.
Yes,
the
good point.
fear, however, that I think we need to look at is they don't have to go 23 of 30 to hurt the Notre Dame defense in the pass game. They just have to go 10 of 17 with a couple bombs.
Yeah.
And that's because again, we talk, they almost averaged 200 yards rushing a game last year, despite the fact they gave up 1 million sacks. And Jordan Travis wasn't any worse last year than he's going to be this year.
Sure.
Right. And so now they don't have Tamori Terry, which as a player hurts them, but as a culture in your locker room helps them.
Yeah.
They had a couple, 2 or 3 really headaches on their roster last year receiver. Those guys are gone. And so when I look at Florida State, they weren't very good throwing the ball this year. But look, that was Notre Dame's weakness on defense last year. They're past those numbers are pretty mediocre.
Well, absolutely.
And especially when you consider where the pass defense was the previous 2 years, Notre Dame had a top 10 pass defense in 2019 and 2018. They were outstanding. Well, all the guys from that defense are gone. And now it's okay, well, what will this group be? Now, again, we could talk about some of the issues that Notre Dame had last year in the pass defense. You know, Sean Crawford playing safety. He got exposed against Florida State. They had Sean Crawford playing corner. Remember that? Yep. And he got smoked by Tamori and Terry a couple times, one for a long touchdown. Well, Sean Crawford should have been playing corner. He's playing corner because dudes were out with COVID.
Yeah, right.
Because Notre Dame went almost a month between the South Florida game and the Florida State game because of COVID. You know, so you have to factor that into it. But, you know, look, is Clarence Lewis, is he going to be ready to play in this game? Is Tariq Bracy going to be back to the guy that he was in 2018 as a true freshman? Florida State tried to go deep on him several times. They went 0 for 6 trying to test Tariq Bracy back in 08 or 2018. Is he going to be back to being that guy? Is Cam Hart ready to step up and be a playmaker? And the other concern that I have is, look, the second safety, Florida State took advantage of that last year multiple times for big plays. They didn't go after Sean. They went after Sean Crawford, and they went after the Houston Griffith and DJ Brown. That's who they went, and Shane Simon in the pass game. Smart. That's who they attacked. And Mike Norvell is a smart football. He didn't get here. Right. He didn't become the head coach of Florida State just because, you know, his stunning good looks or because they thought it was cool. He used to have cornrows when he played at Central Arkansas, right? It's because this guy's a really – yes, he did. You didn't know that?
Stop it.
You didn't know that? Oh, I got to show you that when the show's over.
Oh, my gosh.
Mike Norvell's a really good, smart football coach. And he's coached against Notre Dame before, not just last year. And again, that's the other thing. Mike Norvell wasn't at this game last year.
No, he wasn't. And that's a point I don't think a lot of people are bringing up, at least Notre Dame fans.
Yeah.
I'm sure Florida State fans are, well, we didn't even have our head coach, you know, at that game. But, yeah, I mean, that's still a very good point.
The point is both teams were hurt by COVID last year. Notre Dame hadn't played in a month, and Florida State didn't have their head coach. Who's their offensive, you know.
Right, he's their offensive coordinator, essentially.
He faced Notre Dame twice when he was at Arizona State. They scored on Notre Dame both times in that game. If you remember, even though Notre Dame won in 2013, Arizona State still scored a lot. And then, of course, in 2014, they scored over 50 points, although they were aided by, like 2 pick sixes that game, right? So, anyway, I think he's a smart offensive coach. I really like Mike Norvell as an offensive mind. I think that is an area that we have to take into consideration, that this isn't just some talented team with a coach who can't direct them. That's the Willie. Right. That was the case in the Willie Taggart era.
Oh yeah,
that's not the case in the Mike Norvell area. So he's going to have them schemed up. He's going to have athletes to throw to, like I said, and they've got some freshman receivers this year. Josh Burrell, Malik McClain. There's some good football players there. Again, no great ones, but some good players there. If the Notre Dame secondary is as bad as maybe some outsiders think it's going to be, this could be a problem.
Yeah.
And for you and I, guys that think the secondary is going to be better, this is going to be a legitimate test for them. And you and I both know, Vince, even if Jordan Travis is missing receivers, you and I are going to be able to evaluate this game and say, you know what? That guy was missing receivers. This is going to be a problem in future games because they're going to have quarterbacks that are going to be more accurate, you know, in this regard.
Yeah, if guys are running open and just because he's not hitting them, then we're going to have a different discussion when we're talking on Monday or Tuesday or whenever you and I get together and talk.
Right.
But, yeah, it's going to be a different discussion because, look, Notre Dame still has to cover these guys. And you're going to be at the game. You're going to see the all-22 because that's going to be your sight line. Right. And you're going to be able to tell me, and I dread the text where you text me and you're like, tight end was wide open down the middle, or, he missed the post completely that was open, or, whatever the case may be. If I start getting those texts, that's when I start to get a little bit worried.
Right. Now, again, part of that could be first game jitters. But again, This is a test for the Notre Dame defense. And it's also going to be a big test for the Notre Dame pass rush.
Big time.
This is not a great Florida State offensive line. They're a much better group of run blockers than they are pass blockers. At least that's how they were last year. That was also true of Dylan Gibbons during his tenure at Notre Dame. So is Notre Dame going to be able to take advantage of that? That's another question mark that I have. They should. If they can't, that's going to be, again, you talk about early red flags, that would be one. Now, you could chalk it up to first games and all that kind of stuff, but there does come a point in time when you have to say, okay, I'm sorry, that's a team you should thrive. So we talked about the concerns we have on the perimeter. That's the greatest way to neutralize it is right there, Vince. Well, you want to neutralize great athletes, get to the quarterback.
That's my biggest takeaway from the pass offense versus the pass defense for Notre Dame. And I've been saying it all along. That's how you protect a young secondary or an inexperienced secondary, is by getting after the quarterback. And I think that this Notre Dame front, whether it's the front 3/4, or in a combination of with the linebackers, I think that they're going to be able to do that. And that the biggest weakness to this pass offense is the offensive line going into this game that we know about, right? Now, they are shuffling some things around. There's guys, like you said, that aren't starting that started last year. Obviously, Dylan Gibbons is an addition that he wasn't there last year. But as a unit, they're going to have to prove to me that they can stop the pass rush.
Right.
They're going to have to. And I don't think that they're going to be able – they might be able to slow it down a little bit, but I don't think they're going to be able to contain it the whole time. And I think that's the biggest mismatch in this in this show for me is Notre Dame's pass rush versus Florida State's offensive line. I just don't think that they can stop them.
Agree. Agree based on what we've seen. Now, Notre Dame has to prove us correct on that. And again, this is going to be interesting because if Florida State, in my opinion, is going to go after Cam Hart and they're going to go after Houston Griffith, they're going to say, because they went after Houston last year. Remember, Houston was committed to Florida State for a while, if you remember correctly, as part of the 2018 class. Notre Dame flipped them from Florida State. They went after him last year. Houston did not play well. He gets a chance at redemption. And then you look at Cam Hart, they're going to go after him. Hey, what's this kid, converted wide receiver? Let's go after him. So both of those guys are going to get challenged early. And that's what I would do.
I think Houston Griffith is playing with a confidence level that we haven't seen before.
And he didn't have that last year.
No, gosh, no. I've seen it with my own two eyes again. I've seen him playing with that confidence. So I agree with you. I think that's exactly what Florida State is going to do. They're going to go after 3 and they're going to go after 5, and that's what they should do based on past results and based on
a smart coach would do that. And Mike Norvell is a smart coach.
Yeah, absolutely. But I have faith in the guys that they're going to be going up against.
So advantage, Vince, for you in this game, in the pass game matchup
it goes to Notre Dame, and it's because of the pass rush. I said I have faith in the guys in the back. I do, but I still need to kind of see it.
Yeah,
I have more faith in the pass rush versus Florida State's offensive line.
Yeah, look, I mentioned that Florida State has good players. Keyshawn Helton's a good short, kind of good route runner, really shifty kind of guy with some speed. Ontario Wilson's a good, solid football player. Andrew Parchment's a really good route runner. He transferred from Kansas. He's kind of their big guy. He's 6'2", 6'3". The other two kids are like 6 foot, 5'9". They're going to bring some big guys off the bench. So they're going to be able to throw a lot at Notre Dame, and I do like their talent. I like Cam McDonald at tight end. Their running backs can make plays in the pass game, but I think Notre Dame's got some athletes too that I'm excited to see. And so I think ultimately it's really close from a skill standpoint, but I give Notre Dame the advantage because one name we didn't mention is Kyle Hamilton.
Right.
The best player on the football field in this matchup is going to be wearing a Notre Dame helmet. Okay. So that's something that you look at. I think that helps. I think Notre Dame can match them athlete for athlete, if not superior, slightly superior. But it's in the trenches where Notre Dame should have the big advantage, and that's why I give Notre Dame a clear advantage in this part of the game. And if that turns out not to be true, then this is probably going to be a more competitive game than we think it will be.
So the final part of our show is we talk about the scoring defense, or the total defense versus the total offense, and kind of our overall thoughts. It's kind of a summary of what we just did, but diving into the numbers a little bit more specifically. Obviously, Notre Dame has excellent rank. I mean, you can see it right there. Points per game, they're 14. Their third down defense was excellent last year. I mean, absolutely excellent. And they were really good in the red zone defensively, preventing touchdowns. So, and then
they were really bad in the red zone overall, but in regards to forcing threes instead of 6, they were pretty good.
Yes, correct.
And that, yes, exactly.
Yep. And then
they
you look
get
at
better, but yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And you look at Florida State, obviously their numbers, I mean, just look at the numbers. They don't compare.
They're not in the top 50 in anything.
Yeah, exactly. And again, the arrow's pointing up. I mean, they can only get better. But again, I think they need to solidify their quarterback situation. And maybe they have, but to our knowledge at this point, as we're talking, they haven't publicly. And I think that's going to make a big difference in this matchup, who it is, what that matchup's going to look like.
Yeah, Vince, I just, at the end of the day, I look at this and I think the number at the very bottom is going to be the key in this game. And that's turnovers. I think if Notre Dame can be disruptive against Florida State, look, in my opinion, they're going to give up 2 or 3 big plays in this game.
Okay.
And I'm talking like 30 plus.
Okay.
I think they're going to give up 2 or 3 big plays. Florida State has that ability. They're athletic enough to where one misassignment in the run game results in a 40-yard game. They're going to have a couple of those plays.
It's game one.
When we talk about game one mistakes, we talked about this in yesterday's show. We talked about this in the show we recorded this morning. Our Monday show. You're going to have game one mistakes, right? Someone's going to miss a gap. Someone's going to get beat. They're going to, get grabby on a press and get beat over the top. It's going to happen. If they can be disruptive with tackles for loss, which they have a huge advantage of statistically, if they can be productive and disruptive with sacks, which they have a big advantage statistically, we also think they have an advantage in the actual players, then the result's going to be third down. We're going to see Notre Dame dominate. As we said last year, Notre Dame ranked 11th. Florida State is 101st, and then Notre Dame's going to be disruptive and force turnovers. Those bottom 2, to me, are the stats that are going to matter most in this game. If you're giving up a few big plays, but you're forcing them off the field, it's like because you can't hit enough home runs to beat Notre Dame, in my opinion.
Agreed.
They're not going to do that, barring the Notre Dame offense collapsing. If Florida State can't consistently put some drives together, which I don't think they're going to do, then if Notre Dame can force a few turnovers, 2 or 3 turnovers in this game, even if it's just 2, then I think Notre Dame dominates this matchup, and they'll be able to easily survive and take a couple of those big body blows that I think Florida State will give with some big plays, run game and pass game. Like I said, they're going to get 2 or 3 big plays, as long as you're making stops all the other times, being successful, turning some of those. This is the big thing about big plays, Vince, and I'm sure you felt this way in high school. I don't mind giving up a big play as long as it doesn't go for 6.
Absolutely.
And I think of the Virginia Tech game of 2018. Notre Dame gives up that big, long run right up the middle. Osmar Bilal catches the guy at like the 1-yard line, and they end up stopping them and forcing a field goal instead of a touchdown, right? Give me another chance to make a stop, Don't let those big plays be for 6.
Yeah.
If they can do that, then I think Notre Dame dominates this matchup. Even though it'll be competitive, it'll be a great test for Notre Dame, Florida State doesn't have the overall athleticism and talent that they had when these teams played back in 2014. Florida State won at the very end, Notre Dame lost to that undefeated Florida State team, defending champs. And I would argue that this Notre Dame team is better than that Notre Dame team.
Sure.
So I see this as being a clear advantage for Notre Dame, even though it's closer than the one we talked about yesterday.
Well, and I feel like Notre Dame's offense, and I know this is not an offensive show for Notre Dame, but
go with it because it does tie in. It does tie in.
And it ties in for me because I think the Notre Dame offense is going to be able to score, and that's going to allow the Notre Dame defense to take more chances, be more aggressive, and that's where they can pick up.
This one becomes a big part, Vince.
And again, that's where they could potentially give up some big plays. But I think the score is going to be such that it's not going to make that much of a difference. Right. And I feel like this Notre Dame defense is just going to be swarming all over the place, playing under control, but like
swarming is just how they're going to play. I mean,
yes.
And
they're going to be able to do that because the scoreboard is going to be in their favor, and I feel like Florida State is going to take more chances and it's going to bite them. And that's where that turnover stat is really going to come into play. I agree with you. I think Notre Dame is going to force a few of those, and this game's going to be over. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun to watch this defense. And people don't freak out if there's a couple big plays because
Just
that's what
anticipate
fans
it.
do. Expect it.
Yeah.
They have dudes. They have
If they
guys.
stop them from doing that, that's a great sign.
Oh,
And to your point, that's how the Notre Dame offense can impact this game is if Notre Dame jumps on them 17-3 and you take Florida, then it's like if Florida State just wants to run the ball on us, okay. Fine. Take the next 6 minutes off the clock.
Absolutely.
Because you don't have enough time to, you know what I mean? And that's where the offense, if Notre Dame can jump out to a big lead, then Florida State has to go to the air more. Maybe we see them put McKenzie Milton in the game. Maybe they put Chubba Purdy in the game at that point in time if they have to air it out. Well, now you just took all, Florida State's biggest weapon off the field.
Right.
In Jordan Travis.
His most explosive guy they've got. Yeah, right.
Right. So if you're jump on him and Florida State can't just sit back and throw the ball, can't just go run the ball, and you're limiting those big plays, and they have to maybe put more of a passer in the game. That's playing right into Notre Dame's hands. So that's where the Notre Dame offense, absolutely, you're correct, Vince, can have a big role in this game. If they can make Florida State one-dimensional with the score, right, they don't have a chance to move the ball on Notre Dame.
Right.
Where they're going to be able to have success is if they're able to stay balanced. If this is a competitive, if they're down 7 to 10 points, no more than 7 to 10 points throughout the game, they can stay balanced. They can do what they do. Then they'll be able to make some plays in this game. If Notre Dame can jump on them, take them out of their game plan, or if they can be really disruptive up front and defensively get some TFLs and some sacks on first and second down, put Florida State in more pass-oriented situations, then Notre Dame's have some success. And I think this Notre Dame defense is going to have a lot more speed on the field than it did when they played Florida State last year. Because, again, Notre Dame was down some guys when they played this game last year.
Guys playing out of position. I mean, you mentioned it. Sean Crawford's playing corner. I mean, guys playing where they weren't necessarily the best, last year. So I think that makes a big difference. So I think it's obvious, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Advantage to
Notre Dame.
Yeah,
definitely.
Me too.
Yeah. Again, this is the side of the ball that if Florida State's going to pull off the upset, this side's going to have to make some plays. But at the end of the day, they don't have enough horsepower. They don't have a quarterback. If you could take McKenzie Milton as a thrower from 2 years ago and put him with Jordan Travis as a runner, that would scare me. But that player doesn't exist in Tallahassee. That player's, playing somewhere else right now. He's playing in Jacksonville with the Jaguars or something like, you know what I mean? Like that guy's not at Florida State right now. Or he played back in 93, but he ain't on that team now. You know what I mean? And that's where it's advantage Notre Dame in a lot of ways.
All right, Brian, that's going to do it for our first edition of the defensive side of the ball for Notre Dame in our Stacking Up segment. And we appreciate everybody being with us. All right, well, there it was, our Stacking Up segment for this Wednesday, the Notre Dame defense versus the Florida State offense. Again, the Florida State offense is not as bad as people think. Their run game average about 200 yards a game. That was by far their best area on offense. What is this offensive line going to look like against this defensive line? I think that's where in the trenches, right? The trenches is where it's going to be where this game is going to be decided in turnovers. Trenches and turnovers, the two T's. So keep an eye out on that. And again, tomorrow we will be doing our prediction show. So we will get down to the nitty gritty with score predictions and kind of how we think this game is going to go. Things of that nature. And then Friday, of course, we have the mailbag. This Saturday, we will not have a show because, frankly, I'm going to be watching college football. And there's no Notre Dame game. So Sunday, we will have our post-game show, and we will start that, and we will have a post-game show after every single game, half hour after the game, depending. Just depends on how long it takes Brian and I to get to a place where we can do a show. And then normally Sundays will be our Upon Further Review show, but we'll probably do that Monday. But Monday's going to be loaded. Brian actually isn't going to be on the show on Monday. I forgot about that. I will be doing the show with Sean, and we're going to talk about the weekend that was college football. So tomorrow, I see some people already putting their predictions in for what this is going to be tomorrow, Sunday. Try to save those for tomorrow. Get your predictions in tomorrow, and we will talk about that tomorrow. Let me check out the comments here, see if there's any quick questions I can answer before I have to hit the road. Let's see here. Jacob Hayden says, when teams hire a new D coordinator such as Marcus Freeman with Notre Dame, do they have that coordinator look at film of the offense to spot flaws or tendencies so they can make the adjustments and or so that the team can make adjustments to avoid being predictable. You know what? That's what they have analysts for, to be honest with you. Now, I know Marcus Freeman and Tommy Rees have discussions. They talk, and I would be shocked if it wasn't about X's and O's and then things of that nature. But normally, the defensive coordinator has enough on his plate getting the defense ready. He's not going to be watching film of the offense. That's just not in the cards. Again, that's what they have assistant coaches for. That's what they have analysts for, things of that nature. But again, Marcus Freeman's going to talk to Tommy Rees. He's going to say, look, when we see this, it's a tell to what you're trying to accomplish, right? So they're going to have those conversations, but he's not going to specifically sit down and break down the offense's film for the offense. That's called self-scouting, and they have analysts for that. I mean, that is their sole purpose, is to self-scout. And so that is kind of how that works. Everybody's very excited, obviously, for the game. Irish for life, hi, all IB Nation. I'm so fired up for Florida State and what our team can do on both sides of the ball. Could not agree more. A lot of love in here for the Inside the Garage podcast with Kyle Hamilton and company. I have not had an opportunity to listen to that yet. We will see if I can scratch out some time to make that happen. Michael Moore says, how important do you think it is for us to get off to a fast start? I think it's pretty important, to be honest with you. Do I think it's the make or break of the game? I do not, but I do think that it's important. I think that if Notre Dame can score in its first few possessions, I think now the defense can really pin their ears back and just go to town and force those turnovers and get in the backfield and do a lot of things. So I think it is important. I think that will tell us very quickly about how this game is going to go. John Erickson says, bit disturbing that people who were ready to canonize Freeman weeks ago seem nervous Florida State will shred his defense. Relax. Listen to the IB theme song. Let it play out. Lyrics by Brian, vocals by Vince. And David Knight says, let it play out by the Driscolls. That's fantastic. Oh, that's good stuff. That is good stuff. And Brian put in the chat that he's on his way home from Canton, Ohio. So I believe he's in the car right now, which is awesome. So we wish him a safe trip home. Again, we got some predictions in here. Tyler says 45-14. Craig says Notre Dame by 14 plus. Tyler also says will be a big test for the new Brian Kelly program. All the guys are gone from the rebirth Notre Dame had. True test for culture that is set, and I think the team will live up and dominate. I agree. And it's a big test for Jeff Quinn and this offensive line. All the Harry Hiestand influence is gone. Chris Watt obviously is not around anymore as a coach. None of these guys were coached by Harry Hiestand, so the Hiestand effect is gone. So this is going to be a big year for Jeff Quinn. Brian and I have talked about that a bunch. Very interested to see where that goes. If Jordan Travis plays, watch out for screen passes against an aggressive Irish defensive line. Look, the defensive line is going to be aggressive no matter who's in the game. Jordan Travis, what I'd be more worried about with him is getting outside the pocket and making plays with his legs. I think Mackenzie Milton is no stranger to screen game and things of that nature. And frankly, screen game is way more effective when you have a pocket passer. And that's what Mackenzie Milton is probably going to be coming off of his injury. And when you have a pocket passer, that's when the D-line goes after the quarterback and gets upfield too quick. And that's when you can be susceptible to screen passes and things of that nature. So I would actually say Mackenzie Milton, if he's the quarterback, then you got to really watch out for the screen game. Brian McIntyre, listen to this chat every day. First time on the live chat. Go freaking Irish. Brian and Vince are awesome. Thanks, Brian, for coming in, or Byron, excuse me. Wow, it'd be nice if I could read. Thanks, Byron, for coming in and dropping some knowledge on us. Really appreciate that. Good to have you in here. James says, Kelly gave Reese the keys to the offense. I'm not worried about the offense scoring only because our pass rush up front will help to force turnovers, create sack opportunities, even a hurry. Yeah, absolutely. And with the offense scoring, that allows the defense to be even more aggressive and things of that nature. So but Brian is still in the chat. Apparently, he says, Vince, did you enjoy not having to carry Brian in the last 2 days? Either that or somebody hacked his account, which is definitely a possibility with that comment. That's great. Oh, Brian, you kill me. Even when you're not here, you kill me. And I think that is about. Oh, here, Craig says, would you be surprised if Reese lets Cone take some shots down the field early? No, I would not be surprised. I think Cone's going to let it rip down the field. And remember, in the first game that Notre Dame played against Florida State last year, Ian Book even had some plays down the field where he was successful. And if Ian Book can be successful down the field, I absolutely think Jack Cone can be successful down the field. And I would say arguably that Jack Cone has better downfield weapons than Ian Book even had. I'm not giving a pass to Ian Book, but I think that Jack Cone is more willing and more able, and he's got faster dudes to throw the ball to as well. So not that you have to have fast guys to go down the field. That's not what I'm saying. But no, to the question, I would not be surprised in any way to see them take a few shots early on in the game, in the first half, things like that. At all. And Brian not only texted me, but put this in here. He goes, I wasn't hacked. So he's obviously listening to the show, which is fantastic. And Tyler says, as long as we throw it and complete it, don't want Miami game all over again, missing the throw to EQ. Look, you guys have to remember that when you go downfield, you're not always going to complete it, and you don't have to. You don't have to complete long throws to make them effective in your offense. You can throw deep, even with the threat of throwing deep. Yeah, of course you want to complete them, and I think Notre Dame will. But if you have the threat of throwing deep, that still loosens up the defense and allows you to do some other things underneath. So taking those shots, being willing to take those shots is just as important as completing those shots. I shouldn't say just as important, but it's still important. And so, yeah, of course I want them to complete it. But if they're taking shots, that's the important thing, showing that they're willing to do it. Because if they're willing to do it, and Florida State isn't going to respect it, they're going to hit it later on. So you got to remember it that way. All righty then. I think that is going to do it for today's show. Thanks everybody for checking in and checking out our new feature when breaking down the Notre Dame offense and the Notre Dame defense versus the opposition. We're going to keep doing that. We're going to keep bringing it to you because, frankly, Brian and I really enjoyed those shows, and we enjoyed talking ball. That's what we do. We're the coaches on the beat, and we love talking ball. So Tuesdays and Thursdays are going to be just diving into the numbers and getting excited about the game that's coming up. And so it's a lot of fun for us. And Brian doing a little, he's still here. He goes, of course I'm listening. Best ND show on the planet. Yeah, man. Couldn't agree more. But it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to it. So tomorrow, 12:30, we're going to have our prediction show. We're going to dive in and give our score predictions and things of that nature. And then Friday, of course, is our mailbag. No show this Saturday, but this will be pretty much the only Saturday where we don't have a show unless Notre Dame is on a bye. And then Sunday we will have our post-game show, and we will see, how long it takes us, because Brian will be down in Tallahassee. I'll be at home, and so I'll be ready to do the show, but we got to get Brian into a place where he can do the show. So we'll see what time that is. So half hour to an hour. Hit that notification bell. So you know when we're about to go live, so you can jump in and we can talk about the game and get all excited about it. If you're not a member of the board, make sure right there, boards.irishbreakdown.com. Get in there, sign up. Lots of fun activity going on over there. I was just checking it out this morning. Lots of excitement, and it's only going to get better during the game. So I would highly, highly, highly suggest you get on board if you're not already with the Irish Breakdown, community. It's the best part. I absolutely love it. So anyway, Also, if you sign up for the boards, you get a discount on the merch. And I've got my merch on today, right? I'm rocking the long sleeve IB shirt and, showing everybody what's up. Everybody's asking me, hey, what's that IB with the Shamrock? Irish Breakdown, get on board. Okay, get on board. So, get your merch, man. If you guys are coming out to the game, I can't wait to walk around, tailgates and in the stadium and all that and just see the Irish Breakdown family just sporting the merch, man. So get out there, check it out. Lots of good stuff out there. Brian and I have successfully outfitted my entire family. So they're all rocking it. My son wears it underneath his pads on game day. The Gap Closers shirt. So, I mean, this is important stuff, man. We got to get the word out there. So make sure you tune in tomorrow. We got our prediction show. And we'll be talking Irish ball, man, because that's what we do. So thanks, everybody, for joining. Love the Irish Breakdown family. Love all you guys. Glad you're here. And we will talk to you tomorrow.